New Mexico's culture is firmly attached to the land and to the water.
Cuando estoy en el campo, mi vida cambia.
We all want to live in a healthy environment, one where we feel safe and where we can enjoy our natural surroundings and natural resources. Unfortunately, that hasn't always happened in some parts of the United States or in some of New Mexico's communities. Beginning more than 30 years ago, more people started to stand up for their right to a healthy environment. That environmental justice movement has brought a community-based focus to environmental protection. In this program, we will explore the quality of life in two centuries-old neighborhoods of Albuquerque's South Valley, Los Padillas and Mountain View. How is the residents' water affected by industrial operations? And what can the South Valley community do to achieve environmental justice here?
Well, environmental justice would be to have an equal share of all the environmental burdens in our community, which would be clean water, clean air, and just a clean environment overall.
Well, is it really environmental justice or is it environmental injustice? I mean, that's the big question. I think environmental justice would really be to not have one area, one section just completely overloaded with all of the, noxious, hazardous businesses and industries. The city has really grown. I mean, it used to be 30 years ago when they put in the petroleum storage tanks, the city and county weren't even out here. Now we're just everywhere.
And that's where the issue comes from in terms of environmental justice, is that some communities bear a disproportionate burden of these facilities. And that means that our health risks are higher. That means that we have more cancer clusters. That means that our children are more at risk and suffer from learning disabilities. And that ultimately is what it's all about.
Environmental justice means equal protection from environmental and health hazards, and equal access to the decision-making process towards having a healthy environment. Many events led to increased awareness of the environment and its impact on health, including the 1951 Chicano workers' strike against mine companies in Silver City, New Mexico. That strike was due to the unequal, unhealthy, and unsafe treatment of mine workers. Several decades later, in 1987, the United Church of Christ commissioned a study entitled Toxic Waste and Race that found a correlation between the placement of industry and race. People who live in these rural and industrial areas of Albuquerque's South Valley perceive there is environmental injustice in the placement of industry here. And they say that industry poses problems for residents who drink the water, the majority of whom are minorities.
That I find very interesting is that most of the industry in the state is in my community, which is one of the highest in Hispanic population, and mostly Mexican.
So on each one of these properties, young people like yourself.
These two neighborhoods, Los Padillas and Mountain View, are predominantly Hispanic, 70% according to the latest U.S. Census figures, and most of those speak Spanish at home. Los Padillas is agricultural, while Mountain View is industrial.
Well, I think in Mountain View you have so many different industries and industries that are emitting pollutants and discharging pollutants that people are not certain what they are exposed to. But when you have several different types of contaminants, it can result in some health problems. And some things like cancer won't show up for 40 years from now. So it's very difficult to say what may cause that health problem.
We're on the old Camino Real, which was then US 84, and now is Isleta Boulevard. It's been downgraded over the centuries. But as it was the highway entering Albuquerque for many, many years, there's many old underground storage tanks, which unfortunately weren't properly abandoned at that time. So there is a lot of leaking underground storage tanks along the old highway, or Isleta Boulevard now. There is no community or city service for water in Los Padillas. Just recently, in the last 6-7 years, the sewer system came through that is part of the municipal metro sewer system.
A recent survey of South Valley residents reported that water quality is one of their top 3 environmental health concerns. Other worries include noise, crime, air quality, and the city-county waste treatment plant, whose operations emit an offensive odor. One example of the South Valley's legacy of pollution is this property in Mountain View. Here, the improper use of nitrate chemicals contaminated hundreds of acres of farmland.
The Mountain View nitrate plume, we believe, was caused by an old vegetable farm from the 50s and 60s that over-fertilized. As a consequence, it reached groundwater, which flowed to the community of Mountain View that was solely on domestic wells. And some health issues occurred. Water supply was provided, but the plume is still here and is slowly migrating east.
Even today, nitrate concentrations are 30 times greater than national drinking water standards.
This plume is still pretty immense. We have concentrations of 350, and we estimate, based on monitor wells in the vicinity, that it covers 500 to 700 acres. And it is one of the largest nitrate plumes yet identified in New Mexico.
Scientists are encouraged about a pilot test underway that involves injecting native organic bacteria from these tanks into the polluted groundwater. The bacteria consume the nitrates and turn them into nitrogen gas, which is harmless and makes up 80% of the air we breathe. Storage tanks abound in Albuquerque's South Valley, with most so-called major bulk terminals built decades ago in the Mountain View neighborhood. Mountain View has 5 major bulk terminals. They receive millions of gallons of motor and jet fuel and diesel through an expansive underground pipeline, and they store it here in these steel tanks. Every day, tanker trucks fill up here and deliver their cargo to customers all over the nation.
And as a consequence, they have a lot of volume of fuel that goes through the facilities. And each one of these 5 major bulk terminals in the South Valley have had spill of the fuels over the years, whether it's from human error, faulty equipment, or just oversight. Spills have occurred. They are bermed to contain the fuel. However, these are old facilities, so they have shown some issues that have the fuel, when spills have occurred, has gotten into the soils and groundwater and have contaminated.
One of the state's largest Superfund sites is in Albuquerque's South Valley. This is the site where 20 years after leaks were discovered, several industries are now required to work with state and federal authorities to clean up chemical spills here. That contamination forced the shutdown of several municipal wells that provided drinking water to residents of Albuquerque, New Mexico's largest city.
This area is part of the South Valley Superfund site for 2 major contaminant problems. One is because of chlorinated solvents, and the deeper part of the aquifer got contaminated with that. And the companies responsible for that have been extracting the water, treating it, and re-injecting it. Another major factor of contamination in this area was from the petroleum hydrocarbon companies that had releases over the years, historics, and they also caused groundwater contamination. That treatment systems are in place, and they are addressing that as we speak.
When you're looking at environmental justice issues and environmental health issues, it doesn't matter whether industry came first or whether the people came first. The same result is occurring, and that's that people are being exposed to pollutants that are being emitted. And so that's what we're trying to prevent with looking at things like the groundwater protection plan that Bernalillo County and the city of Albuquerque have developed with an advisory group to try and protect the water resources and try and protect communities from being exposed to potential pollutants.
Another concern, dumping into the rural communities' ditches or acequias used to irrigate crops, acequias that are located near domestic water wells.
For instance, my well is 250 feet. Probably most of my neighbors are at least 200 feet. But many, many people are less than 50. So whatever is, if people dump in the ditch or dump in the acequia, that water can absolutely be uptaken right there and become part of that shallow aquifer. And I'm not sure people understand that there is such an interaction at the shallow groundwater.
The community has a lot of concerns because they see all these bulk terminals, the sewer plant, and all this industry and they just don't know if it's healthy for them, and they don't know if it's getting them sick or not, and the community is constantly worrying about that.
Some residents who've seen the effects of industrial accidents here say they happen too often, and they worry that there's no evacuation plan that's been presented to South Valley neighbors in case of a chemical spill. That fear is heightened every time a tanker truck rolls in front of people's homes.
Emergency crews were called in and state police.
This is the scene of emergency crews responding to a spill at the Valero Logistics bulk terminal, formerly Diamond Shamrock. When the computerized switch was incorrectly set, jet fuel poured into the wrong holding tank. As a result, up to 17,000 gallons overflowed. The company removed 11,000 gallons, but 6,300 gallons seeped into the ground because the terminals are simply lined with clay and rock, and they do not have impermeable liners. As a result of these spills, Environment Department officials issued compliance orders to ConocoPhillips and to Valero Logistics. Each company must now install adequate spill control and prevention measures to ensure public health and safety. According to New Mexico Environment Department records, ConocoPhillips has had numerous unauthorized discharges from tanks, including diesel and gasoline spills. In 2003, 34,000 to 40,000 gallons of gasoline spilled. Before that, in 2001, about 20,000 gallons of diesel spilled from tanks and seeped into the ground. Since the late 1980s, a total of 206,000 gallons of chemicals from several companies have contaminated ground and surface water in Mountain View. This kind of occurrence concerns health officials who see patients living in problem areas.
So you're noticing something? Sure. And do you have a primary care provider? Yeah, I do. Okay.
Dr. Robert Sapien is a pulmonary specialist at the University of New Mexico Hospital. He sees patients in the emergency room, including residents of the South Valley who don't have primary care physicians. Dr. Sapien says that makes it difficult to track chronic health problems.
That population tends to use the emergency room more for their primary care. And so now they're going to be seeing a different provider every time they come into the emergency room, as opposed to maybe going to a clinic and seeing just a few providers who will get to know them. And because the symptoms are so nonspecific with some of the toxins, if I come in to see my doctor every other week with the same complaint, and my doctor knows me, then they may start looking and pursuing some of the toxins. Whereas if I come to the emergency room every other week with the same complaint, I'm going to see possibly a different doctor every time, and that doctor may not be able to put it together because they don't know me. So it's really getting down to the symptoms and being known by your provider.
Dr. Sapien says if more people would use one primary care doctor instead of the emergency room when they feel sick, doctors could compile accurate data on the relationship between the environment of the South Valley and residents' health problems. However, he does cite asthma as being out of control, especially in areas where industry dominates and fewer people have access to health care.
It's out of control, basically. And when you look at where it's out of control in industrial areas and inner city.
In the future.
Michael Guerrero works with the Southwest Organizing Project, rallying South Valley residents to work towards environmental justice and thereby a healthier existence.
So people feel that they're powerless in being able to take on some of these industries that have money. So the response to that is being organized as a community, and that's where we found the success and the strength of the community lies, is when people organize together and deal with things collectively.
Responsibility for cleanup of pollution was at issue in a recent case that was thrown out by a federal judge in Albuquerque. It would have forced government and industry to clean up contamination caused by decades of operations in the South Valley. Although the case is under appeal, residents are frustrated and see it as another case of disenfranchisement.
It's continuing environmental injustice towards the people of Mountain View, and in this case, because of the water resource that serves this entire metropolitan area, it's an injustice to all of us. Actually, it's an insult that we, through the legal system, would say it's okay for an industry to come in and pollute so grievously and be excused.
How does a community create environmental justice that calls on everyone to be aware of what's happening in their neighborhoods and invites their participation?
It's all about a dialogue in the community. It's all about communicating with each other, and hearing and validating people's voice, because that's the problem, is that people don't get listened to. And a lot of times the most creative solutions are in the community.
Well, the process is getting better, and I think that the government is listening, because we're getting more involvement from the state environment department. But the biggest problem I see is that they're not doing outreach for the Spanish-speaking community, which is more than half in Mountain View.
And he's the mayordomo of the... He didn't like to say
Sylvia Ledesma isn't community activist. She says events like this youth workshop on groundwater pollution are a great way to bring out the community so people talk to one another, and so that youngsters can understand the hazards of living near industry.
It's important to preserve, and also to help them make responsible decisions, I think, around preserving the community and preserving those natural resources, because you never, whatever job they have, they're going to have to make decisions. And if they know that they're a part of all of this, then hopefully those will be responsible decisions.
And that water that gets in the water is going to be pulled out through a well. So this is one of the reasons why we have to be a little bit concerned about the kinds of things that get in our water.
11-year-old Jenna Ritchie takes this demonstration to heart and offers advice to keep waterways free from pollutants.
I'd advise them just not to throw trash or other chemicals into the water, because they'll be the ones that are gonna get hurt by it, and others. So just to throw it in the garbage. But it'll end up moving towards the wells, and when the city pumps through the wells, it'll end up coming out when you turn on the faucet, and you'll end up just drinking it.
Sin agua no hay nada.
Gavino Andrade owns several acres in the South Valley, where he invites children to discover their agricultural surroundings.
Seguro que sí, para mí no me molestan, a mí pueden venir cuando quieran, como viene el gym con ellos cada rato, y que vengan y que no vienen a hacer ningún mal, vienen a ver cómo se hace el negocio, a ver si aprenden algo.
And of course, the beginning of the season.
Andrade praises community activists who coordinate efforts to keep the South Valley's way of life alive. He encourages everyone to participate. To help bridge gaps between different interests, Bernalillo County's Office of Environmental Health provides funding to hire promotoras who live in the neighborhoods and are community leaders. Julio Dominguez is one of them.
It's a very good feeling to be a promotora or promotor, because you can help not only your community but your own family, your father, your mother, where they're living, and you can tell them about the health effects and how industry affects our lives, and you can also have a chance to talk to physicians and tell what the community is going through and why they're getting sick. But because of all that pumping,
Julio's role as a promotor is to voice community concerns, and he doesn't mince words about industry's responsibility to the residents with whom companies share water.
they should get more community input into what the community really is asking for, which is to either clean up their sites and make them safe for future operations, or they should just get out of our neighborhood. That's basically what many community members have been saying.
I think along with the groundwater protection plan, we also need to look at our permitting and how the permitting is happening. There are a lot of industries that are already located in Mountain View, and I think that as part of the permitting process, we need to look at that before we start issuing permits for other industries and looking at what's being emitted and what the potential health effects are.
Activists leading the struggle for environmental justice want more people to join in the discussion and the search for solutions. And residents like Julie Stevens suggest testing for contaminants directly at the ditch heads and drains.
One of my concerns in terms of environmental health is the water quality in those ditches and drains, and to what extent they're monitored, which at this point it appears they are not monitored at all. Unfortunately, there's a lot of dumping in both the ditches and the drains, which have the potential of polluting that water. So that is one concern and challenge we have. It's all of us who live near the ditches and drains.
I think the lesson is that how important it is for neighborhoods and communities to be organized and to basically stand up and, say that this is a right, that our health is a right, a clean environment is a right, and we should be entitled to these things as anybody else is.
Involving people in their own quality of life sometimes can be quite a challenge. But I think the way we really help people is through their children and through students. And it's through our kids that sometimes the parents wake up that, oh yeah, we do want a quality setting for our kids. And I think our young people of the area can lead us and lead all of our adults into a more involved.
Stephen sees those young people already leading by example.
You wouldn't throw trash and oil and stuff like where it could seep into the ground.
Adults living in the South Valley are encouraged by young people's awareness, and some, like Michael Guerrero, say that vigilance can and should force companies to operate in the community's best interest.
There are solutions out there. There are solutions in terms of recycling. There are solutions that, in terms of production, that can be done, that can cut down on the use of chemicals and hazardous waste and all these kind of things. And the more that they start doing these kinds of things, and I think all of us can realize environmental justice.
Michael Guerrero says when the community takes charge of their lives and their surroundings, it further strengthens the foundation that people working towards environmental justice established some 30 years ago.
Things move slower, obviously, than we would like. There's still, environmental problems. There's still poverty that exists in the neighborhoods. But I think that in terms of where the community is at, compared to where it's been or could have been if people did not organize, then we're definitely in a better position than we were before.
Well, I think it's important for the community to know how to respond to issues that they may be dealing with. And there are several ways of doing that. They can contact groups like Southwest Organizing Project. They could become a board member of the Environmental Gross Receipts Tax Board that allocates funds to address things like water contamination. They can call the State Environment Department and look at getting their water tested. So there are different avenues, and I'm hoping through information that community residents will know that they're not alone, that there are other ways of working to try and solve some of the problems.
To get informed and involved with water issues and asserting your right to environmental justice, contact the Bernalillo County Office of Environmental Health or the South Valley Partners for Environmental Justice, the Southwest Organizing Project, and Calpulli Iscali, the Rio Grande Community Development Corporation, and the New Mexico Environment Department Groundwater Quality Bureau.